The morning shift change at Naval Intelligence Compound Gate 7 brought its usual chaos of rotating personnel and updated security protocols. Sergeant Marcus Webb adjusted his utility belt and surveyed the checkpoint with the satisfaction of a man who controlled access to one of the most classified facilities on the eastern seaboard. Behind him, Petty Officers Damian Lynch and Sophia Torres processed the steady stream of contractors, analysts, and military personnel flowing through the reinforced barriers. Webb took pride in his thoroughness. 3 years manning this post had taught him to read people instantly. The nervous contractors clutching their temporary passes. The cocky junior officers flashing IDs like badges of honor. The career intelligence analysts who moved with quiet purpose. Each category required different handling, and Webb prided himself on never letting the wrong person through. The October wind carried salt from the nearby harbor as a figure approached the outer perimeter. Webb glanced up from his morning reports, noting the civilian clothes immediately. Jeans, navy jacket, nothing remarkable. The woman walked with steady purpose toward the checkpoint, but her casual attire triggered Webb's first assessment. Lost tourist, most likely. Or perhaps one of those contractors who thought showing up in weekend clothes demonstrated their civilian status. Torres noticed her approaching and exchanged a knowing look with Lynch. They had seen this type before. Contractors who received their facility access through email and assumed the process would be simple. Usually took 10 minutes to explain why their paperwork was insufficient or their sponsor was unreachable. Have you ever had to deal with security checkpoints at your workplace or when traveling? Sometimes that moment of proving who you are can feel more complicated than it should be, especially when someone makes assumptions about you before you even speak. The woman reached the primary barrier and stopped at the designated line. Webb stepped forward, his posture shifting into official mode. The morning sun caught her dark hair as she waited patiently for his acknowledgement. Webb gestured toward the visitor processing station. "Ma'am, if you're looking for the main visitor center, that's back about half a mile down the access road. You'll need to register there first before approaching this checkpoint." The woman remained at the line and reached into her jacket pocket. "I need to access Building 7 for a briefing." She produced a military identification card, holding it steady between 2 fingers. Lynch stepped closer to Webb, his eyebrows rising with surprise. The ID appeared legitimate at first glance, but appearances could deceive. Contractors often carried military identification from previous service, and some of the newer CAT cards looked remarkably authentic. Webb had seen enough attempted deceptions to remain skeptical. Torres activated the card scanner while Webb examined the woman more carefully. She stood with unusual stillness, not fidgeting like most visitors under scrutiny. Her posture suggested familiarity with military protocols, but civilian clothes contradicted that impression. Many former military personnel retained their bearing years after discharge. Webb accepted the card and inserted it into the scanner. The device hummed as it attempted to read the embedded chip. "These weekend warriors always think their old cards still work," he muttered to Lynch. "Half the time they're expired or deactivated." The scanner beeped twice and displayed an error message. Webb removed the card and examined it more closely. The holographic elements appeared genuine, and the photograph matched the woman standing before him. But system glitches were common with older cards or those issued by different commands. Torres leaned over Webb's shoulder as he inserted the card again. Sometimes these contractors get cards that look official but don't have proper facility access loaded. "We might need to call their sponsor for verification." The woman waited without comment as Webb attempted to scan repeatedly. Her silence struck him as odd. Most people became defensive when their credentials were questioned, offering explanations or expressing frustration. This woman simply stood at the line with the patience of someone accustomed to security procedures. Lynch checked his watch and noted the growing line behind her. "Sir, we have the morning rush starting. Should we move her to secondary processing?" Webb considered the suggestion. Secondary processing meant additional verification procedures and potential delays for everyone. But something about this situation warranted extra caution. The combination of civilian clothes and military identification often indicated contractors attempting to bypass normal visitor procedures. He looked at the woman again, noting her calm expression. "Ma'am, we're having some technical difficulties with your card. Can you tell me the purpose of your visit and who your sponsor is for today's meeting?" "Building 7, briefing room designation November 7, she replied without hesitation. "Operation Windfall briefing at 0830 hours. The specificity of her response gave Webb pause. Contractors typically provided vague descriptions of their business, uncertain about room numbers or proper military time references. This woman spoke with the precision of someone familiar with classified operations terminology. Torres whispered to Lynch about the operation name. Neither had heard of Operation Windfall, but classified briefing names changed frequently and remained compartmented from security personnel. The woman's knowledge of the specific room designation suggested legitimate business, but appearances had deceived them before. Webb decided to attempt one more scan before initiating secondary processing procedures. The morning schedule could not accommodate extended delays, and his supervisor emphasized efficiency during shift changes. He wiped the card reader sensor and inserted the identification carefully. The scanner activated with its familiar electronic whir. This time, the display screen flickered differently. Instead of the standard green processing indicator, amber warnings appeared across the monitor. Webb stared at the unexpected symbols, uncertain how to interpret the new display format. Lynch moved closer to observe the screen over Webb's shoulder. The amber indicators continued flashing, accompanied by text he had never seen during routine processing. His 3 years at this checkpoint had familiarized him with standard clearance levels and error messages, but these symbols were entirely unfamiliar. Torres noticed the change in both men's postures and approached the scanner station. The flashing amber had shifted to solid red warnings across multiple sections of the display. The card reader was clearly processing information, but not in any format they recognized from their training. The woman maintained her position at the line, observing their confusion without offering assistance or explanation. Her stillness suggested familiarity with security procedures that sometimes required additional processing time. Webb found her lack of anxiety increasingly notable as the scanner continued its unusual behavior. A new sound emerged from the card reader system. Instead of the typical completion beep, a series of ascending tones indicated the scanner was accessing external databases. Webb had heard similar sounds when processing certain intelligence personnel, but never with such extended duration. The red display suddenly expanded across the entire monitor screen. Transforming the familiar checkpoint interface into something Webb had never encountered. Bold white text emerged against the crimson background. Processing classified clearance level. The words pulsed twice before additional information cascaded down the screen in rapid succession. Webb's confident posture faltered as he read the display. His 3 years of routine processing had never prepared him for this particular sequence. Lynch stepped closer, his casual morning demeanor evaporating as he recognized the security classification symbols appearing across multiple database fields. Clearance verification complete appeared at the top of the screen, followed by a series of codes Webb couldn't interpret. Below that, more specific information materialized: Special Operations Command, Tactical Operations Division. The text continued scrolling as external databases responded to the card reader's queries. Torres moved behind both men, reading over their shoulders as the most startling line appeared: SEAL Division Tactical Operations Clearance Level 7. The number 7 flashed 3 times before settling into steady display. She recognized the significance immediately. Level 7 clearance exceeded anything held by base security personnel, including their commanding officers. Webb stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open as the implications became clear. Lynch reached past him to check the cardholder information section, which now displayed Lieutenant Kate Brennan, United States Navy. Below her name, additional details emerged: Current assignment classified operations unit. Building 7 access authorized. The woman at the checkpoint maintained her patient stance as the 3 security personnel absorbed the information displayed before them. Her expression suggested this delay was neither unexpected nor concerning. Webb realized she had been waiting for them to complete their verification process, not attempting to convince them of her legitimacy. Lynch's hands trembled slightly as he navigated through additional database screens. The system continued providing information as his security clearance allowed. Operational status: active. Deployment status: recently returned. Briefing authorization: confirmed for 0830 hours. Torres stepped backward from the scanner station, her face flushed with embarrassment. She had processed hundreds of contractor badges and temporary passes, but never encountered someone whose clearance level dwarfed everyone at the checkpoint combined. The casual assumptions she had made minutes earlier now seemed monumentally inappropriate. Webb looked up from the screen toward Lieutenant Brennan. His expression transformed from skeptical authority to nervous uncertainty. "Ma'am, I apologize for the delay. Your clearance level wasn't immediately apparent in our standard processing protocols." Brennan nodded once, acknowledging his comment without elaboration. "No explanation required, Sergeant. Security protocols exist for valid reasons." Her voice carried neither irritation nor condescension, simply professional acknowledgement of necessary procedures. Lynch attempted to recover some semblance of normal checkpoint operation. He printed her temporary access badge from the system, noting the red stripe indicating Level 7 clearance. The printer's mechanical sounds seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet that had settled over the checkpoint. "Building 7, briefing room, November 7, Brennan stated calmly. "Operation Windfall, briefing scheduled for 0830 hours. She spoke as someone accustomed to providing necessary information efficiently, without unnecessary elaboration or defensive justification. Torres quickly accessed the facility directory to verify the room assignment. Her fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard as she confirmed the operational briefing schedule. The system displayed Brennan's name prominently among the attendee list, along with several other personnel whose clearance levels exceeded her own authority to view. Webb realized the magnitude of his earlier assumptions as he processed Brennan's patient response to their questioning. She had endured their skeptical comments and processing delays without mentioning her actual status or demanding immediate access. Most personnel with high-level clearances expected expedited treatment and became irritated by standard security procedures. The checkpoint's morning efficiency had completely dissolved as other personnel, waiting in line, observed the extended processing time. Lynch glanced at the growing queue behind Brennan, recognizing that their usual rapid processing rhythm had been disrupted by this unexpected complexity. Torres completed the access verification and prepared Brennan's entry documentation. The system automatically generated building access codes and escort requirements for her clearance level. She printed the additional authorizations, noting that Brennan required no escort within Building 7 due to her operational status. Webb handed Brennan her identification card along with the temporary facility badge. The red stripe across the badge served as immediate visual confirmation of her clearance level to any base personnel she might encounter. "Ma'am, you're cleared for immediate access to Building 7 through the main entrance. No escort required." Brennan accepted the documents and secured them in her jacket pocket. "Thank you, Sergeant. Professional courtesy appreciated." She turned toward the facility entrance without waiting for additional acknowledgement, her movement suggesting familiarity with the base layout and building locations. Lynch watched her walk toward Building 7, her stride confident and purposeful. The casual civilian clothes that had initially suggested contractor status now appeared as deliberate operational security, designed to avoid drawing attention during her approach to the facility. Torres began processing the next person in line, her efficiency restored but her demeanor noticeably more respectful. The encounter with Lieutenant Brennan had provided an unexpected reminder about making assumptions based on appearance rather than proper credential verification. Webb returned to his position behind the scanner station, but his usual confidence had diminished. The morning's events had demonstrated gaps in his understanding of the personnel who regularly accessed this facility. His pride in reading people accurately had been thoroughly challenged by someone whose actual status exceeded his ability to recognize. The checkpoint resumed its normal operational rhythm, but the dynamic among the three security personnel had shifted. Their casual commentary about visitors and contractors had been replaced by more careful attention to proper verification procedures and respectful treatment, regardless of initial appearances. Lynch periodically glanced toward Building 7, wondering about the classified briefing that Lieutenant Brennan was attending. Operation Windfall remained unknown to him, but her clearance levels suggested involvement in activities far beyond anything he had previously encountered. Torres completed processing several routine entries before commenting quietly to Webb about the morning's unusual situation. The incident had provided valuable education about the range of personnel who might approach their checkpoint and the importance of maintaining professional standards throughout the verification process. Webb nodded in agreement, recognizing that his assumptions had been thoroughly corrected by the morning's events. The encounter would certainly influence his approach to future checkpoint operations, particularly when processing personnel whose initial appearance might not immediately suggest their actual status or clearance level. Colonel Patricia Reeves discovered the security anomaly during her routine morning intelligence briefing. The automated facility report flagged unusual clearance verification activity at Gate 7, specifically noting Level 7 access processing outside normal parameters. Such reports typically indicated technical malfunctions or unauthorized access attempts, both requiring immediate command attention. Reeves accessed the detailed incident log from her secure terminal, noting the timestamp and personnel involved. The report indicated extended processing time for a Level 7 clearance holder, significantly longer than standard protocol required. Webb's security team had logged the incident as resolved, but the processing duration suggested complications that warranted investigation. Her 22 years of military service had taught her to recognize patterns that others might overlook. Extended processing times often indicated procedural failures, equipment malfunctions, or personnel training deficiencies. Level 7 clearances were sufficiently rare that any processing delays could indicate serious security concerns. Reeves initiated access to the Gate 7 security camera system, reviewing footage from the morning's shift change period. The timestamp directed her to the specific interaction involving Lieutenant Brennan's checkpoint processing. She observed the entire sequence from Brennan's approach through her final authorization and departure. The footage revealed details absent from the written incident report. Webb's initial dismissive gesture toward the visitor processing station. The skeptical expressions exchanged between Lynch and Torres when Brennan presented her identification. The repeated scanning attempts accompanied by commentary she couldn't hear, but whose tone seemed inappropriately casual. Reeves paused the footage at several key moments, studying the body language and interactions between security personnel and Lieutenant Brennan. The visual evidence suggested assumptions based on Brennan's civilian attire rather than proper credential verification protocols. Such assumptions represented serious security procedure violations. She accessed Brennan's personnel file through the classified database, discovering information that provided crucial context for the morning's events. Lieutenant Brennan had returned from a 6-month classified deployment in Syria just 3 days earlier. Her operational specialty involved deep reconnaissance missions requiring extensive cover identity maintenance. The personnel file explained Brennan's civilian clothes as operational security protocol. Personnel returning from classified deployments often maintained low profiles during transition periods to prevent potential identification by hostile intelligence services. Wearing civilian attire during facility access was standard procedure, not unusual contractor behavior. Reeves immediately contacted Commander Sarah Voss, Brennan's commanding officer within the Special Operations Command structure. The secure communication system connected them within minutes, allowing direct discussion of the morning's incident and its implications for base security procedures. Commander Voss confirmed Brennan's recent return from classified operations and her legitimate business at the morning briefing. She expressed concern about the processing delays, noting that operational personnel expected efficient facility access during mission-critical activities. Any suggestion of discrimination or procedural bias required immediate investigation. Voss provided additional context about Brennan's operational record. Her recent deployment had resulted in significant tactical intelligence gathering that directly supported ongoing counterterrorism operations. The successful mission outcomes demonstrated her competence and justified her high clearance level, making the checkpoint delays particularly inappropriate. Reeves documented the conversation with Commander Voss before initiating broader investigation into Gate 7 checkpoint procedures. She accessed 3 months of processing logs, searching for patterns in verification times and procedural variations among different personnel categories. The data analysis revealed disturbing trends that extended beyond the morning's single incident. Female personnel consistently experienced longer processing times than male colleagues with identical clearance levels. The differences were significant enough to suggest systematic rather than random procedural variations. Reeves expanded her analysis to include video footage from multiple checkpoint interactions over the previous month. The visual evidence supported the statistical data, showing female personnel subjected to additional questioning, repeated scanning attempts, and skeptical examination of their credentials more frequently than male counterparts. Several specific incidents stood out during her review. A female intelligence officer with Level 5 clearance had been questioned about her actual business despite presenting valid credentials. A female pilot with Level 6 clearance had endured 15 minutes of verification procedures that typically required 3 minutes for male personnel. The pattern became undeniable as Reeves examined additional footage. Web security team consistently treated female personnel with greater suspicion, regardless of their clearance levels or official business. The discriminatory treatment appeared unconscious but systematic, suggesting inadequate training rather than deliberate policy violations. Reeves accessed the base's bias awareness training records for all Gate 7 security personnel. Webb, Lynch, and Torres had completed their required training 18 months earlier, but no follow-up sessions have been scheduled. The training effectiveness appeared insufficient to address the procedural disparities revealed by her investigation. She contacted Master Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, the base's senior security coordinator, requesting immediate consultation about checkpoint procedure modifications. Rodriguez had extensive experience implementing bias prevention protocols and could provide expert guidance about corrective measures and additional training requirements. Rodriguez arrived at Reeves's office within 30 minutes, bringing comprehensive data about security checkpoint operations across multiple facilities. Her experience included implementing systematic improvements that had eliminated similar procedural disparities at other installations. The consultation with Rodriguez confirmed Reeves's concerns about the Gate 7 security team's approach to credential verification. The processing time disparities and additional questioning patterns indicated unconscious bias that required immediate intervention through retraining and enhanced oversight procedures. Rodriguez recommended comprehensive review of all checkpoint interactions involving female personnel over the past 6 months. Such analysis would determine whether the discriminatory patterns represented isolated incidents or systematic procedural failures requiring broader institutional responses. Reeves authorized the expanded investigation, recognizing that the morning's incident with Lieutenant Brennan represented visible symptoms of deeper institutional problems. Addressing the underlying issues would require systematic changes to training, oversight, and accountability measures for all security personnel. The investigation scope expanded beyond Webb's immediate team to include supervisory personnel responsible for checkpoint training and evaluation. Reeves needed to determine whether the procedural failures resulted from individual performance issues or inadequate institutional guidance about proper security protocols. She scheduled formal interviews with all Gate 7 security personnel for the following morning, requiring detailed explanations of their credential verification procedures and decision-making processes. The interviews would provide opportunities to identify specific training deficiencies and implement targeted corrective measures. Reeves also initiated contact with the base's Equal Opportunity Office, requesting formal documentation of the investigation and coordination with relevant oversight agencies. The procedural disparities discovered during her analysis potentially violated multiple military regulations regarding equal treatment and professional conduct. The morning's single incident involving Lieutenant Brennan had revealed systematic problems requiring comprehensive institutional response. Reeves recognized that addressing these issues effectively would require sustained effort and ongoing monitoring to prevent similar occurrences in the future. Commander Voss contacted Reeves again during the afternoon, reporting that Lieutenant Brennan had requested minimal personal consequences for the involved personnel, but maximum institutional changes to prevent future discrimination. Her professional response emphasized systemic improvement over individual punishment. Reeves appreciated Brennan's institutional focus, recognizing that sustainable improvements required educational rather than purely punitive approaches. However, the systematic nature of the problems demanded accountability measures that would demonstrate serious commitment to procedural compliance and equal treatment standards. The formal summons arrived at Gate 7 during the afternoon shift change, requiring Webb, Lynch, and Torres to report to Colonel Reeves's office immediately for official questioning regarding checkpoint procedures. Webb read the directive twice, noting the unusual formality and specific reference to morning security protocols involving classified personnel processing. Master Sergeant Rodriguez arrived to assume temporary checkpoint supervision as the three security personnel prepared for their command interview. Her presence indicated serious command attention to their morning procedures, though Webb remained uncertain about the specific concerns requiring investigation. The walk to Building 4 administrative offices provided Webb with time to consider potential issues from the morning's operations. Lieutenant Brennan's processing had been unusual but ultimately successful, with all proper protocols followed according to his understanding. The extended verification time resulted from system complexity rather than procedural failures. Lynch walked beside him, expressing similar confusion about the investigation's focus. Their checkpoint maintained excellent security records and had never experienced unauthorized access incidents. The morning's encounter with Lieutenant Brennan had been educational but hardly warranted formal command intervention. Torres remained quiet during their approach to Colonel Reeves's office, though her expression suggested greater concern than her colleagues displayed. The systematic nature of the investigation implied deeper issues than routine procedural review, possibly involving discrimination complaints or protocol violations she hadn't previously considered. Colonel Reeves's office occupied a corner of Building 4 with windows overlooking the main facility entrance. Her 22 years of service were evident in the commendations and photographs covering one wall, establishing her authority and experience immediately upon entering the space. Sergeant Webb, reporting as ordered, ma'am. Webb assumed attention position before Reeves's desk, followed by Lynch and Torres in similar formal postures. The seriousness of their situation became apparent through Reeves's measured examination of each person before speaking. Reeves gestured toward 3 chairs arranged before her desk, indicating they should be seated for extended discussion. This morning's incident at Gate 7 involving Lieutenant Brennan has raised concerns about checkpoint procedures that require immediate clarification. I need detailed explanations of your decision-making process during her credential verification. Webb shifted in his chair, recognizing the defensive posture he was adopting despite conscious efforts to remain professional. Ma'am, Lieutenant Brennan's processing required additional verification due to the unusual combination of civilian attire and military identification. We followed standard security protocols for credential authentication when initial scanning encountered technical difficulties. Reeves opened a file containing printed documentation from her investigation. Standard protocols require identical processing for all personnel regardless of attire, provided their credentials are valid. Your team subjected Lieutenant Brennan to questioning and verification procedures lasting approximately 12 minutes. Identical clearance levels typically require 3 minutes maximum. Lynch leaned forward in his chair, attempting to support Webb's explanation. Colonel, the system malfunctioned during initial scanning, requiring multiple attempts before successful authentication. The additional time resulted from technical issues rather than inappropriate questioning or discriminatory procedures. Reeves removed several printed pages from her file, placing them on the desk facing the 3 security personnel. These are processing logs from yesterday's morning shift. Contractor personnel with temporary badges received average processing times of 2.7 minutes. Lieutenant Brennan's military identification required 12.4 minutes despite higher clearance authorization. Torres recognized the implications of the statistical comparison immediately. The data demonstrated that legitimate military personnel received slower processing than temporary contractors, contradicting basic security protocols that prioritized military identification over civilian access requests. Webb examined the documents, searching for explanations that might justify the processing time disparities. Ma'am, Lieutenant Brennan's clearance level was significantly higher than our typical checkpoint traffic. Level 7 authorization required additional database verification that standard clearances don't trigger. Reeves pulled additional documentation from her file, spreading security camera transcripts across her desk. Audio recording systems capture all checkpoint conversations for security purposes. Would you like to review your actual comments during Lieutenant Brennan's processing, or should I read them directly? The 3 security personnel exchanged glances, recognizing that their informal comments had been recorded and analyzed. Webb's confidence began wavering as he realized the investigation included specific evidence rather than general policy review. Audio transcript, 0742 hours. Sergeant Webb states, "These weekend warriors always think their old cards still work. Half the time they're expired or deactivated." Reeves looked up from the document. Lieutenant Brennan was neither weekend warrior nor former military with expired credentials. Lynch's face flushed as he realized the implications of their recorded assumptions. The casual commentary that seemed appropriate during routine processing had been preserved as evidence of prejudicial attitudes toward legitimate military personnel seeking authorized access. Reeves continued reading from the audio transcripts. 0745 hours. Petty Officer Torres states, "Sometimes these contractors get cards that look official but don't have proper facility access loaded." Lieutenant Brennan held active duty military identification with level 7 clearance, not contractor credentials. Torres sank deeper into her chair, recognizing how their assumptions had influenced their treatment of Lieutenant Brennan despite her legitimate status. The recorded evidence demonstrated clear bias based on appearance rather than proper credential evaluation. 0747 hours. Petty Officer Lynch states, "We might need to call their sponsor for verification." Reeves placed the transcript on her desk with deliberate emphasis. Lieutenant Brennan required no sponsor verification due to her operational status and clearance level. Your assumptions were incorrect from the beginning. Webb attempted to regain control of the situation through formal explanation. "Ma'am, our caution reflected appropriate security consciousness given the unusual circumstances. We processed Lieutenant Brennan's credentials thoroughly and granted proper access once verification was complete." Reeves removed video footage printouts from her file, showing still images from the morning's checkpoint interaction. Thorough processing doesn't explain your initial direction toward visitor processing before examining her identification. You assumed civilian status before evaluating her credentials. The visual evidence contradicted Webb's explanation about appropriate security procedures. The photographs clearly showed him gesturing toward visitor processing immediately upon Lieutenant Brennan's approach, before any credential examination or identification presentation. Lynch recognized the deteriorating situation and attempted honesty. "Ma'am, we didn't expect someone dressed in civilian clothes to have that level of clearance. Our assumptions influenced our initial response, but we corrected our procedures once we understood her actual status." Reeves nodded, appreciating Lynch's admission while noting its implications. "Your expectations were based on appearance rather than proper security protocols. This represents exactly the type of bias that compromises facility security and violates equal treatment standards." Torres decided to contribute additional information, hoping honesty might improve their situation. "Colonel, similar incidents have occurred with other female personnel. We've questioned intelligence officers and pilots more extensively than we probably should have, usually due to initial assumptions about their business here." Webb shot Torres a sharp look, recognizing that her admission expanded the investigation beyond the morning's single incident. However, her honesty provided Reeves with confirmation of the systematic problems identified through her broader data analysis. Reeves made notes about Torres's admission before addressing the expanded scope of discriminatory treatment. "How many additional incidents can you recall involving inappropriate questioning of female personnel with legitimate facility access?" Torres considered the question carefully, recognizing the importance of accurate information. "Over the past 3 months, probably 6 or 7 situations where we spent additional time verifying female personnel compared to male colleagues with similar clearances or business purposes." The admission confirmed Reeves's statistical analysis and provided grounds for comprehensive investigation of checkpoint procedures. Webb realized that the situation had escalated far beyond explanation or justification into formal misconduct inquiry requiring institutional response. "Based on this discussion and supporting evidence, I'm implementing immediate administrative actions. Sergeant Webb, you are suspended from checkpoint duties pending full investigation." Petty Officers Lynch and Torres will receive formal counseling and mandatory retraining before returning to security responsibilities. Webb's defensive posture collapsed as the formal consequences became clear. "Ma'am, I request reconsideration of the suspension. My security record has been exemplary, and this morning's incident was resolved appropriately despite initial complications." Reeves closed the investigation file with finality. "Your security record doesn't address systematic discrimination against female personnel over multiple months. The evidence demonstrates pattern behavior requiring institutional intervention, not isolated incident requiring minimal correction." Master Sergeant Rodriguez entered the office as scheduled, having completed her initial assessment of Gate 7 checkpoint operations. Her arrival signaled the transition from investigation to implementation of corrective measures and enhanced oversight procedures. Rodriguez carried comprehensive documentation about security protocol modifications and training requirements necessary to address the procedural failures identified through Reeves's investigation. Her experience implementing similar improvements at other facilities provided the expertise needed for effective institutional change. Master Sergeant Rodriguez initiated comprehensive interviews with female personnel across the naval facility, beginning with a systematic review of checkpoint experiences over the previous 6 months. Her investigation methodology involved confidential discussions with military members, civilian contractors, and intelligence officers who regularly access the base through various security points. The first interview session took place in a secure conference room within Building 4, providing privacy for personnel to discuss their experiences without concern about professional repercussions. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Valdez, an intelligence analyst with Level 5 clearance, described her routine checkpoint processing as consistently longer and more interrogative than her male colleagues experienced. Valdez provided specific examples of discriminatory treatment that corroborated the patterns identified in Colonel Reeves's initial investigation. Security personnel regularly questioned her actual business despite valid credentials, requested additional identification beyond military requirements, and subjected her to secondary screening procedures that male officers with identical clearances avoided. Rodriguez documented each interview carefully, noting common themes and specific incidents that demonstrated systematic bias rather than isolated procedural failures. The pattern emerged clearly as additional female personnel shared similar experiences of skeptical questioning, extended processing times, and assumptions about their legitimate facility access. Captain Maria Santos, a helicopter pilot with Level 6 clearance, described checkpoint interactions that required her to explain her aircraft assignment and operational duties despite presenting valid credentials. Male pilots with identical clearances typically received immediate processing without additional questioning about their professional responsibilities or facility business. The interviews revealed that female personnel had developed informal strategies to minimize checkpoint delays, including wearing military uniforms whenever possible, carrying additional identification beyond requirements, and scheduling facility access during specific shifts where certain security teams demonstrated more professional behavior. Dr. Elena Hutchinson, a civilian contractor with specialized technical clearance, reported that security personnel routinely questioned whether she was visiting the facility to see family members rather than conducting authorized work. Her male contractor colleagues never faced similar assumptions about their professional versus personal reasons for facility access. Rodriguez expanded her investigation to include personnel from other military branches who accessed the naval facility for joint operations and training exercises. Air Force Captain Rachel Kim described checkpoint processing that consistently required verification of her inter-service authorization despite properly documented orders and clearance levels. The systematic nature of the discriminatory treatment became undeniable as Rodriguez completed 15 interviews over 3 days. Female personnel across all service branches, clearance levels, and professional categories experienced longer processing times and additional questioning that their male counterparts avoided through routine credential verification. Colonel Reeves received Rodriguez's preliminary findings during a secure briefing session that documented the scope of procedural failures at Gate 7 checkpoint. The evidence supported immediate implementation of comprehensive corrective measures, including personnel retraining, enhanced oversight, and modified security protocols. Lieutenant Brennan requested a meeting with Colonel Reeves to discuss the investigation's focus and potential outcomes for the involved security personnel. Her approach emphasized institutional improvement over individual punishment, recognizing that sustainable change required educational rather than purely disciplinary responses. Brennan arrived at Reeves's office wearing her military uniform, a deliberate choice that contrasted with her civilian attire during the checkpoint incident. The professional presentation reinforced her legitimate military status, while avoiding any suggestion that her previous clothing choices had justified discriminatory treatment. Colonel, I appreciate the thorough investigation of checkpoint procedures, but I want to emphasize my preference for institutional changes over individual consequences. Brennan spoke with the directness of someone accustomed to mission-focused communication. The security personnel demonstrated unconscious bias that training can address more effectively than punishment. Reeves appreciated Brennan's institutional perspective while noting her responsibility to address systematic discrimination through appropriate accountability measures. Lieutenant, your professional approach to this situation is commendable, but the evidence indicates systematic problems requiring both educational and disciplinary responses to ensure lasting improvement. Brennan nodded, recognizing the balance between institutional learning and individual accountability. I understand the need for consequences that demonstrate serious commitment to change. My concern is ensuring that corrective measures produce lasting cultural improvement rather than temporary compliance. The conversation between Reeves and Brennan established a framework for institutional response that balanced educational initiatives with accountability measures. Their discussion emphasized comprehensive systemic changes designed to prevent similar incidents while addressing the documented pattern of discriminatory behavior. Rodriguez presented her complete findings to the base leadership team during an emergency session convened to address the security protocol failures. Her documentation included statistical analysis, interview summaries, and recommended corrective measures based on successful implementations at other military installations. The base leadership authorized immediate implementation of mandatory bias awareness training for all security personnel, beginning with comprehensive education about unconscious prejudice and its impact on professional decision-making. The training program included specific scenarios and case studies designed to address the types of discriminatory assumptions identified through the investigation. Sergeant Webb received formal notification of his transfer from security duties to logistics operations, effective immediately upon completion of mandatory retraining requirements. The reassignment removed him from checkpoint responsibilities while providing opportunities for professional development in areas where his experience could contribute positively. Webb's reaction to the transfer orders mixed disappointment with recognition that his checkpoint performance had failed to meet institutional standards. The formal reprimand accompanying his reassignment documented the discriminatory behavior patterns and required successful completion of bias awareness training before assuming new responsibilities. Petty Officers Lynch and Torres received written counseling that documented their participation in discriminatory checkpoint procedures while acknowledging their cooperation during the investigation. Their counseling included mandatory additional training and probationary periods requiring enhanced supervision of their security responsibilities. Lynch accepted his counseling with apparent relief that more severe consequences had been avoided. His cooperation during the investigation and honest admission of inappropriate assumptions contributed to the reduced disciplinary measures, though his security performance would remain under enhanced scrutiny. Torres demonstrated genuine remorse about her participation in discriminatory treatment of female personnel. Her written counseling included specific training requirements about professional conduct and equal treatment standards, along with mentorship assignments designed to improve her understanding of bias prevention. Rodriguez implemented new checkpoint protocols that emphasized clearance level as the primary determinant of processing procedures, explicitly prohibiting additional questioning based on appearance, attire, or assumptions about personnel status. The revised protocols included specific timelines for verification procedures and required documentation of any processing delays. The new security protocols included installation of additional monitoring equipment that provided enhanced oversight of checkpoint interactions. The cameras captured both visual and audio evidence of all personnel processing, creating accountability measures that would prevent future discriminatory behavior through consistent surveillance. Rodriguez established randomized audit procedures that involved senior personnel observing checkpoint operations without prior notification to security teams. These surprise evaluations assessed compliance with new protocols and identified any regression toward previous discriminatory patterns. The base implemented mandatory quarterly training sessions for all security personnel, replacing the previous annual requirements with more frequent education about bias prevention, professional conduct, and equal treatment standards. The enhanced training schedule demonstrated institutional commitment to sustaining cultural improvement. Lieutenant Brennan returned to her normal operational duties within Special Operations Command, participating in classified briefings and mission planning activities that utilized her recent deployment experience. Her unit's operational success rate remained the highest within the division, reinforcing the professional competence that had been questioned during her checkpoint processing. Commander Voss provided Colonel Reeves with updated information about Brennan's operational contributions, emphasizing her value to ongoing classified missions and the inappropriateness of any treatment that suggested lesser professional status. The information reinforced the importance of preventing similar incidents through sustained institutional vigilance. The institutional response extended beyond Gate 7 to include comprehensive review of security procedures at all base checkpoints. Rodriguez's investigation had revealed that discriminatory patterns might exist at other locations, requiring systematic evaluation and corrective measures throughout the facility. Base personnel received facility-wide notification about the new security protocols and enhanced oversight measures. The communication emphasized zero tolerance for discriminatory treatment and encouraged reporting of any incidents that suggested bias in security procedures or professional interactions. The comprehensive institutional response demonstrated command commitment to eliminating discriminatory behavior while establishing sustainable procedures for maintaining equal treatment standards. Rodriguez's systematic approach provided the framework for lasting cultural change that would prevent similar incidents through enhanced training, oversight, and accountability measures. Colonel Reeves scheduled follow-up evaluations to assess the effectiveness of implemented changes and identify any additional modifications necessary to ensure complete elimination of discriminatory checkpoint procedures. Her commitment to sustained oversight reflected recognition that cultural change required ongoing attention rather than single corrective interventions. 3 months after the checkpoint incident, Master Sergeant Rodriguez reviewed comprehensive data demonstrating the success of implemented security protocol changes. Processing times at Gate 7 had achieved complete equalization across all demographic categories, with average verification periods of 2.8 minutes regardless of personnel gender, attire, or initial appearance. The statistical transformation reflected fundamental cultural change within the security operations. Female personnel no longer experienced extended questioning or additional verification procedures beyond those applied to male colleagues with identical clearance levels. The discriminatory patterns that had persisted for months had been eliminated through sustained training and enhanced oversight. Rodriguez's monthly audit reports documented consistent compliance with new checkpoint protocols across all shifts and personnel rotations. Security teams demonstrated professional conduct that prioritized credential verification over appearance-based assumptions, reflecting the effectiveness of comprehensive bias awareness training and accountability measures. Sergeant Webb completed his mandatory retraining program and adapted successfully to his new logistics responsibilities. His performance in supply chain management demonstrated competence that had been obscured by his previous security role difficulties. The transfer had provided opportunities for professional growth while removing him from situations where his unconscious biases had created problems. Webb's logistics supervisor reported positive contributions to base operational efficiency and professional conduct that met institutional standards. His experience had taught him valuable lessons about assumption-making and professional judgment that improved his overall military performance in appropriate assignments. Petty Officers Lynch and Torres emerged from their probationary periods with enhanced understanding of bias prevention and equal treatment requirements. Their security performance demonstrated consistent application of revised protocols, reflecting genuine learning rather than temporary compliance motivated by disciplinary concerns. Lynch became an informal advocate for proper checkpoint procedures among newer security personnel, sharing his experience about the importance of credential-based rather than appearance-based processing decisions. His transformation from participant in discriminatory behavior to supporter of equal treatment illustrated the effectiveness of educational rather than purely punitive responses. Torres volunteered for additional bias awareness training beyond minimum requirements, developing expertise that qualified her for peer mentorship responsibilities. Her genuine commitment to professional improvement and equal treatment standards made her a valuable resource for ongoing cultural development within the security operations. The enhanced monitoring systems installed at all base checkpoints provided continuous oversight that prevented regression toward previous discriminatory patterns. Security personnel understood that their interactions were consistently observed and evaluated, creating accountability that sustained professional conduct improvements. Random audit procedures conducted by Rodriguez and her team maintained consistent evaluation of checkpoint operations without creating excessive oversight that interfered with normal security functions. The balance between accountability and operational efficiency demonstrated effective institutional management of cultural change initiatives. Lieutenant Brennan continued her operational duties within Special Operations Command, participating in classified missions that utilized her specialized reconnaissance, training, and deployment experience. Her unit's success rate remained exceptional, contributing to ongoing counterterrorism operations and strategic intelligence gathering activities. Brennan's professional reputation within the special operations community reflected her competence and dedication rather than any association with the checkpoint incident. Her focus on institutional improvement rather than individual consequences had contributed to lasting cultural changes that benefited all facility personnel. Commander Voss incorporated the checkpoint incident into training scenarios used at other naval facilities, demonstrating how unconscious bias could compromise security effectiveness and professional standards. The case study provided valuable educational material about the importance of maintaining equal treatment protocols regardless of initial assumptions. The training scenarios developed from Brennan's experience emphasized the security risks created by assumption-based rather than credential-based processing decisions. Personnel who might possess crucial clearances or operational responsibilities could face inappropriate delays or questioning that compromised mission effectiveness. Colonel Reeves received commendations from higher command for implementing model diversity and inclusion protocols that effectively addressed systematic discrimination while maintaining security effectiveness. The base's response to discovered bias became a template for similar improvements at other military installations. The comprehensive approach that balanced accountability with education had produced measurable improvements in checkpoint operations while demonstrating institutional commitment to equal treatment standards. The success attracted attention from military leadership seeking effective strategies for addressing similar cultural challenges. Base personnel surveys conducted 6 months after the incident revealed significant improvements in perceptions of fair treatment and professional conduct among female military members and civilian contractors. The positive changes extended beyond checkpoint operations to influence overall base culture and interpersonal interactions. Rodriguez's systematic approach to cultural change had created sustainable improvements that continued beyond the immediate corrective measures. The enhanced training, oversight, and accountability systems functioned effectively without requiring constant intervention or extraordinary management attention. The incident's long-term impact included policy changes that were adopted across multiple naval installations, creating standardized approaches to bias prevention and equal treatment that protected personnel throughout the service branch. Brennan's professional response had contributed to improvements benefiting thousands of military members. Does a story like this resonate with you because you've experienced moments where people made assumptions about your capabilities before really getting to know what you could do? Sometimes the most powerful changes happen when we address those automatic judgments we all make. 1 year after the initial incident, a new female SEAL candidate arrived at Gate 7 for her first facility access as part of advanced training assignment. Petty Officer Torres processed her credentials with immediate professional courtesy, recognizing Level 6 clearance authorization without additional questioning or verification delays. The candidate's processing required exactly 2 minutes and 47 seconds, consistent with standard protocols for her clearance level and authorization type. Torres provided facility access information and building directions with respectful efficiency that reflected complete cultural transformation from previous discriminatory practices. The smooth processing represented the success of institutional changes that had eliminated bias-based assumptions from checkpoint operations. Security personnel demonstrated professional conduct that prioritized mission effectiveness over appearance-based judgments, creating environments where all qualified personnel received appropriate treatment. Torres reflected on the contrast between current procedures and her previous behavior, recognizing personal and professional growth that had resulted from confronting unconscious bias. Her transformation from participant in discriminatory behavior to professional security specialist illustrated the possibility for meaningful individual change within institutional improvement. The new SEAL candidate proceeded to her training assignment without experiencing delays or inappropriate questioning that might have affected her performance or professional confidence. Her processing experience reflected institutional standards that supported rather than hindered qualified personnel in accomplishing their mission responsibilities. Rodriguez observed the interaction from her oversight station, noting the professional conduct that had become routine rather than exceptional at Gate 7. The cultural transformation had achieved sustainability through systematic training, accountability, and leadership commitment that maintained improvements without extraordinary intervention. Lieutenant Brennan completed another classified deployment 6 months later, returning to the same checkpoint where her original incident had occurred. Her processing took 2 minutes and 53 seconds, reflecting normal verification procedures applied consistently regardless of her previous experience or current attire choice. The professional treatment Brennan received demonstrated complete institutional memory of lessons learned rather than individual recognition of her specific case. Security personnel applied proper protocols based on clearance verification rather than personal familiarity or historical knowledge of previous incidents. The checkpoint had become an example of effective bias prevention and equal treatment that supported mission effectiveness through professional security procedures. Personnel from other installations visited to observe operations and learn implementation strategies for similar cultural improvements at their locations. Master Sergeant Rodriguez received assignment to implement similar security protocol improvements at additional naval facilities, carrying expertise developed through the comprehensive response to Brennan's incident. Her systematic approach provided proven methodology for addressing unconscious bias while maintaining security effectiveness. The base's transformation became a permanent element of military institutional culture, with new personnel receiving thorough orientation about equal treatment standards and bias prevention as essential components of security professionalism. The changes had evolved from corrective measures to standard operating procedures. Colonel Reeves's leadership during the incident response contributed to her promotion and assignment to broader responsibilities for military culture development. Her balanced approach to addressing discrimination through education and accountability had proven effective for creating lasting institutional change. Lieutenant Brennan continued her operational career with distinction, participating in missions that contributed to national security while serving as an example of professional excellence that transcended any association with checkpoint incidents or discrimination experiences. Her focus on institutional improvement had created lasting benefits for countless military personnel. The comprehensive cultural transformation achieved through systematic response to one discriminatory incident demonstrated how individual experiences could catalyze broader institutional improvements. The changes extended far beyond addressing specific bias to create sustainable professional standards that supported mission effectiveness through equal treatment of all qualified personnel. Years later, the incident remained part of institutional memory as an example of effective leadership response to discover discrimination. The systematic approach that balanced individual accountability with cultural education had produced lasting improvements that continued benefiting military personnel and operational effectiveness throughout the service branch.